Namaskar. Now we are going to study about the social facilities and amenities. Settlement geography is the study of human land, water and resources use, population density patterns and settlement growth. It is essential to urban planning and urban redesign. Urban planning helps ensure that growth occurs only in the sustainable fashion. Urban redesign is the science of reshaping a fading urban area to restore its usefulness to the local population, sustain growth and ensure health and safety in order to return an area to economic viability. Social amenities are essential to the establishment and smooth functioning of settlement as a social entity. These amenities, primarily in the form of educational, health and community facilities, are essential services that a city is obliged to extend to its population for the facilitation of a basic standard of living within the city. The success of amenities depends on the factor of serviceability. In proportion to the population of the city, that is the proportion of population of the city that is served adequately by these amenities. It is also essential that there be a hierarchical structure of the facilities, which would be provided as per the scale of the settlement, starting from neighborhood facilities to city level amenities. For instance, in the case of educational facilities, the provision of nurseries at each urban village level, junior high schools at a higher level, followed by high schools and colleges at the levels of the city or the country. Hence, in this episode, the following aspects are going to be seen: the hierarchy of urban settlements, the hierarchy of rural settlements, road development planning efforts in India, role of the Indian state in primary education and healthcare in India. The first aspect is the hierarchy of the urban settlements. According to the United Nations study in 1995, by the year 2015, 10 of the world's 15 largest cities will be in Asia, excluding Japan. 3 of these will be in India. In 1950, the same region claimed only 3 of the world's 15 largest cities, whilst India claimed only 1. These projections suggested that the demographic growth in India's large cities will be high, partly due to national population growth and partly due to immigration. The logistic model used by the United Nations, the World Bank and the other international agencies for the projection of urban population worldwide suggested that India is poised for rapid urbanization, along with several other countries in South and East Asia. The proponents of the strategy believe that linked India with the global economy will increase the inflow of foreign capital and facilitate indigenous investments, resulting in rapid development of infrastructure and industries. This is likely to give impetus to the process of urbanization, since much of the industrial growth and consequent increase in employment will be within or around the existing urban centers. Even when industrial units are located in rural settlements, in a few years' time, the latter acquire urban status. Reduction of public sector intervention, ensuring appropriate prices for infrastructure and urban amenities through elimination or reduction of subsidies. Development of capital market for research, mobilization, facilitating private and joint sector projects, simplification of legislative system to bring about appropriate land use changes and location of economic activities, etc., are being advocated as a remedial package with World Bank in 1995, Expert Group on Commercialization of Infrastructure in 1996, World Bank in 1998. The parastatal agencies like housing boards, water supply and sewage boards, development authorities, etc., that were created in the post-independence period and had taken over many of the functions of local bodies, have come in for sharp criticism on the grounds of inefficiency, lack of cost effectiveness and continued dependence on grants for sustenance. The vacuum created by the limited withdrawal of the state in the provision of urban infrastructure is sought to be filled up also through non-governmental organizations and community-based organizations besides the local authorities. The enthusiasm for the above package of solutions among both international and national organizations is the reason why issues concerning hierarchy of social settlements have not received adequate attention from researchers. The urban hierarchy becoming top heavy is that the larger urban centers have experienced faster demographic growth as compared to smaller settlements. The class 1 cities, for example, registered an average annual growth rate of 3% during 1981 to 91, which is higher than that of lower order towns. More important, the class 1 cities exhibit a lower disparity in their growth rates measured through coefficient of variation compared to those in order size classes. Scholars have argued that the former experience relatively high and stable demographic growth because they are linked to the national and sometimes international market. In the smaller towns that are mostly rooted in their regional economy, however, population growth tends to be low and fluctuating over time and space. This provides a basis for the proposition that is India. There exists a dual urban structure wherein the larger cities are integrated with the higher order system and are part of the growth dynamics which by and large is absent in the smaller towns. Next is special scheme for urban areas. Municipal hospitals exist in most Indian cities, but generally public hospitals are quite inadequate for the rapidly expanding urban population. Apart from a large private sector, the different public health infrastructure that cater to urban population include state governments, PHCS, industrial hospitals, dispensaries and hospitals set up as part of the employee state insurance scheme, and urban health and family welfare centers run by city municipal corporations. The second aspect is the hierarchy of rural settlements. The rural economy, as much as urban economy, is an integrated part of the overall Indian economy. Any talk of overall development without rural development, particularly in a country where 3/4 of people below the poverty line resides in rural areas, is flaved. Poverty is indeed a global issue. Its eradication is considered integral to humanity's quest for sustainable development. Reduction of poverty in India is therefore vital for the attainment of international goals. The Integrated Rural Development Program, it is also called as IRDP. It is a rural development program of the Government of India launched in financial year 1978 and extended throughout India by 1980. It is a self-employment program intended to raise the income generation capacity of target groups among the poor. The target group consists largely of small and marginal farmers, agricultural laborers and rural artisans living below the poverty line. The pattern of subsidy is 25% for smaller farmers, 33% for marginal farmers, agricultural laborers and rural artisans, and 50% for scheduled caste, scheduled tribes families and physical handicapped persons. The objective of Integrated Rural Development Program is to enable identified rural poor families to cross the poverty line by providing productive assistance and inputs to the target groups. The assets, which could be in primary, secondary or tertiary sector, are provided through financial assistance in the form of subsidy by the government and term credit advanced by financial institutions. The program is implemented in all the blocks in the country as a centrally sponsored scheme founded on 50:50 basis by the center and state. The scheme is merged with another scheme named Swarna Jayanti Gram Swarogar Yojana since 1st April 1999. Under this aspect, now we are going to study the individual rural settlements. Just as all human settlement planning must be an integral part of national development planning, so planning for individual rural settlements must be part and parcel of planning for general rural development in a region or nation. Planning for the improvement of individual rural settlements should take into account the present and expected structure of rural occupations and appropriate distribution of employment opportunities, services and facilities. Particular attention should be paid to appropriate locations of marketplaces, community centers, potable water supply, health and education facilities and transport services including loading terminals. Second one is respect for local customs and traditions as well as to new needs and requirements. Use of local resources and traditional techniques and styles of constructions. Next is rural housing. The rural housing program is implemented by the Ministry of Rural Development through the Indira Awas Yojana scheme, which is a centrally sponsored scheme where the cost is shared between the center and the state on a 75:25 basis. The criteria adopted for allocation of financial resources between the states or union territories gives greater emphasis to the states with higher incidence of shelterlessness. 75% weightage is given to housing shortage and 25% weightage to the poverty ratios prescribed by the Planning Commission for state level allocations. For district level allocation, 75% weightage is given again to housing shortage and 25% to SC or ST component of the population. The Samagra Awas Yojana was taken up in 25 blocks to ensure convergence of housing, provision of safe drinking water, sanitation and common drainage facilities. The Housing and Urban Development Corporation has extended its activities to the rural areas, providing loans at a concessional rate of interest to economical weaker sections and low income group households for construction of houses. Social Security Program. Democratic decentralization and centrally supported social assistance programs were two major initiatives of the government in the 1990s. The National Social Assistance Program, launched in August 1995, marks a significant step toward fulfillment of the directive principle of state policy. The National Social Assistance Program has three components. The first component is National Old Age Pension Scheme, the second component is National Family Benefit Scheme and the third component is National Maternity Benefit Scheme. The National Social Assistance Program is a centrally sponsored program that aims at ensuring a minimum national standard of social assistance over and above the assistance that states provide from their own resources. The National Old Age Pension Scheme provides a monthly pension to destitute BPL persons above the age of 65. The National Family Benefit Scheme is a scheme for BPL families who are given Rs 10,000 in the event of the death of the breadwinner. The National Maternity Benefit Scheme provides Rs 500 to support nutritional intake for pregnant women. The third aspect is road development planning efforts in India. The efforts is preparation of road development plans in India dates back to 1927. These efforts are continued in the form of 20-year road development plans. India Road Congress is the body which formulates this plan with Government of India directive. The road development plan, which currently forms as a guiding document, is the Prospective Road Development Plan for India Vision 2020. This becomes guiding document at national and state levels in India. The plan addresses number of wide-ranging aspects including certain fundamental planning and engineering principles in setting targets for road development by hierarchy. Rural road planning efforts in India. In terms of planning efforts, planning for rural roads is very well addressed in many studies and practices in India. Several states in India do have such prepared plans. These plans may be old. It is gratifying to note that India has embarked on major rural roads network development program few years back. It is known as Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana. The Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana of India is funded by central government. The states are advised to develop plans and post to center for funding. State roads planning and development efforts in India. The state roads are generally planned as per the State Road Development Plan 3, if prepared and available. If not, the Road Policy 4 and 5-year plans form the base. The state roads like national highways have got significant attention. Better tools and practices in planning, making investment decisions, engineering designs, maintenance practices, construction management, etc. are being particularly followed in states where they are developed with external aid. Towards this, World Bank suggested a process which is followed for inception to the completion of the projects. A major gap, State Roads Network Master Planning. There exists a major gap largely in terms of scientific tools followed in evolving the long range prospective road network master plans at the state level in India. The state of Uttar Pradesh is no exception to this. The ensuing sections address this aspect from settlement planning, traffic planning and economic decision perspective. Next is the context for road planning. The demand for roads and road transport is growing and is vital. The phenomenon needs to be considered seriously in cases of meeting the demand for roads and road transport. Therefore, a comprehensive development plan for developing all categories of roads is essential. In this regard, it is worthwhile to mention that whether it is a national highway crossing many states and connecting major cities, metropolitan or a village road connecting a small hamlet to its nearby market town, they all have been and will continue to play an important role in achieving the envisaged balanced development of the state. However, for enabling for socio-economic mobility of society, the efficient and economic planning of network of all categories is essential. Such planning must include vast category of roads falling between the above cited two extremes, national highway and village road. They include middle order roads such as state highways, major district roads and some other district roads, which connect many medium level towns and small settlements. Importance of such road is twofold. Firstly, these roads act as collector of traffic from thousands of village roads densely spread all over the state, thus forming a heavy and strong base of pyramid of hierarchy of roads. Secondly, these roads also act as feeder roads to the all important truck route system comprising national highways and some other state highways. Thus, the need to develop the network master plan for road system has been strongly felt. The gap between desired needs and satisfied demand has been vast. These roads not only connect number of larger and smaller cities and middle order towns, but also several other important centers contributing to the state's economy. These centers include several industrial centers, agricultural market towns, tourist attractions and such towns having important social infrastructure facilities that are health, education and other amenities. The fourth aspect is role of the Indian state in primary education. Governments both at the center and state have been trying, and perhaps more so in the last 2 decades, to attain the goal of universal primary education. The recent All India efforts initiated by the central government are briefly mentioned here. The 73 and 74th constitutional amendments underline the role to be played by local bodies both in rural and urban areas with respect to provision and governance of education. The 11th and 12th schedules include in the constitution through the above mentioned constitutional amendments identified educational governance and provision as one of the functions to be developed to the local bodies. The 11th schedule includes among other functions of Panchayati Raj institutions the following educational including primary education and secondary schools, teachers training and vocational education, adult and non-formal education, literacy and cultural activities. The authorities and responsibilities of urban local bodies states the following with respect to education, that is promotion of culture, education and aesthetic aspects. Next is district primary education program. The Government of India launched district primary education program in 1994 to attain the goal of universal elementary education. This program was attempted with a totally new approach of district specific planning, decentralized management and community participation, empowering and capacity building at all levels. Some of the stated objectives are to provide all children with access to primary education, reduce dropout rates at the primary school level to less than 10%, strengthen the capacity of national, state and district level institutions and set up organizations for planning, management and evaluation of primary education. The district primary education program was launched with the assistance of various multilateral aid agencies and foreign government bodies. Most of the monetary assistance was either in the form of soft loans or outright grants. Sarva Shikshana Abhiyan. The central government launched the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan in 2001. In 2002, amendment to the constitution declared free and compulsory education to all children between the age 6 to 14 years. The aim of this program is to provide meaningful and quality education to all children between the age 6 to 14 by 2010. Some major objectives of this program are: all children complete 5 years of primary schooling by 2007, all children complete 8 years of schooling by 2008, bridge social and gender gaps in primary education by 2007 and in elementary education by 2010. Next is draft bill for free and compulsory education. A bill to provide free and compulsory education to all children between the ages of 6 to 14 years was prepared under the previous government regime. The present government has recirculated the bill for discussion in 2005. The other programs are the 86th Amendment of the Constitution in December 2002 made free and compulsory education for all children in the 6 to 14 age group a justifiable fundamental right. The centrally sponsored scheme for elementary education were streamlined and rationalized through a zero-based budgeting exercise, and all the schemes were converged under 5 major schemes are Sarva Shiksha Abhiyana, National Program for Nutritional Support to Primary Education, Teachers Education, Kasturba Gandhi Balik Vidyalaya and Mahila Samakya. The midday meal scheme was universalized at the primary level, with the central government providing conservation cost enhanced transport subsidy in addition to supplying food grains free of cost to states. The last aspect is healthcare in India. Healthcare is one of the India's largest sectors in terms of revenue and employment, and the sector is expanding rapidly. During the 1990s, Indian healthcare grew at a compound annual rate of 16%. The healthcare divide. When it comes to healthcare, there are two Indias: the country that provides high quality medical care to middle class Indians and medical tourists, and the India in which the majority of the population lives a country whose residents have limited or no access to quality care. Today, only 25% of the Indian population has access to Western, that is allopathic medicine, which is practiced mainly in urban areas where 2/3 of the India's hospitals and health centers are located. Many of the rural poor must rely on alternative forms of treatment such as Ayurvedic medicine, Unani and acupuncture. The federal government has begun taking steps to improve rural health care. Among other things, the government launched the National Rural Health Mission 2005 to 2012. The aim of the mission is to provide effective health care to India's rural population with a focus on 18 states that have low public health indicators or inadequate infrastructure. These include Arunachal Pradesh, Assam, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Himachal Pradesh, Jharkhand, Jammu and Kashmir, Manipur, Mizoram, Meghalaya, Madhya Pradesh, Nagaland, Orissa, Rajasthan, Sikkim, Tripura, Uttaranchal and Uttar Pradesh. Through the mission, the government is working to increase the capabilities of primary medical facilities in rural areas and ease the burden on to tertiary care centers in the cities by providing equipment and training primary care physicians in how to perform basic surgeries such as cataract surgery. The urban poor fare even worse because they cannot afford to visit the private facilities that thrive in Indian cities. Next is lack of insurance. A widespread lack of health insurance compounds the healthcare challenges that India faces. Although some form of health protection is provided by government and major private employers, the health insurance schemes available to the Indian public are generally basic and inaccessible to most people. Only 11% of the population has any form of health insurance coverage. For the small percentage of Indians who do have some insurance, the main provider is the government run General Insurance Company along with its 4 subsidiaries. The New India Assurance Company, Oriental Fire and Insurance Company, National Insurance Company and the United India Insurance Company. General Insurance Company is able to obtain funds for underwriting from other countries, although foreigners are not allowed to own insurance companies. Only 1% of the population was covered by private health insurance in 2004 to 2005. Group insurance accounted for 35% of the total health insurance business during that period. India's first medical insurance scheme for the poor was launched in 1996 to 1997 budgets. The Jan Arogya Yojana scheme is marketed by the 4 subsidiaries of General Insurance Company and covers people between the ages of 5 to 70 for pre and post hospitalization expenses for up to 30 and 60 days respectively. Among other things, that will require more state governments to pursue micro insurance initiatives such as the Yashaswini insurance scheme in Karnataka, so that most or all of the population can afford to purchase at least a minimum level of coverage. The widespread availability of health insurance would help to drive demand for services and provide additional revenue to improve the quality of care. Lastly, I conclude about this topic by saying our main plan of objective was to develop our country into an economically strong and prosperous one, and we had a favorable balance of trade when the British left India in 1947. At that time, the main problems afflicting our people were poverty, unemployment and lack of educational and training facilities and basic amenities for an ever increasing population, rather expanding families. Our physical resources were meager. With this background, if we look back, we have achieved much progress. Today, our people are much better clothed and fed, and some schooling facilities are available.